Today's Neville Goddard discussion is inspired by this quote here from William Blake, who also inspired Neville. And the quote is, "I am in you and you in me, mutual in divine love." Now let's relate this over to a quote here from Neville, in which he states, "The world and all within is man's conditioned consciousness objectified. Consciousness is the cause as well as the substance of the entire world. So it is to consciousness that we must turn if we would discover the secret of creation. Knowledge of the law of consciousness and the method of operating this law will enable you to accomplish all you desire in life. Armed with a working knowledge of this law, you can build and maintain an ideal world." So let's talk about this a little deeper. I decided to record this video after a snowboarding session because I wanted to ensure that I was in an ideal fluidity of mind to be able to discuss the nuances of some realizations that I had over the last few weeks, which involved a number of conversations with clients. Maybe you've heard me say this before. I believe people show up in some way, somehow, to contribute to our vision, and some way, somehow, we contribute to their vision, their goals, their aspirations, desires, and so forth. That's a belief that I have. And I see it play out in conversations with others. And one of my beliefs that is an aspect of that particular belief, a part of that belief system, is the idea that when we deal with clients, when we have conversations, when we consult with clients, they tend to ask for guidance or counsel on areas in which we have already achieved success in, and they also teach us what we can do more of. In other words, they help us identify where we are not living the philosophy to the level and degree of self-persuasion so that we can make the changes within ourselves, and as a result, they change. So these clients talked about transitioning over to a higher degree of doing what they really love to do, which is creating their own ideal world, accomplishing all what they truly desire. And they're involved with a number of business initiatives that they realize that they would like to transition away from so that they could really do what they really love to do. Now, upon reflection of my own experience, I realized that reality rearranges itself to reflect your vision. So they're on the journey to realizing their vision, and this is part of the journey. I'm on the journey to realizing the next vision, and I already realized that vision, which is doing what you really love to do and showing up each day, enjoying and knowing that exactly where you are right now in your entrepreneurial endeavor, artistic expression, is exactly where you want to be. So, again, they're in a way saying, how did you do that? As well as, what are things that you could do more of? And so I shared with them a story about a client in which we had some challenges, and I thought that it was important for me and them to transition in a different direction that was actually a lot more harmonious. So it was actually me going into more of transitioning away from those initiatives, which were very good at the time and very helpful, mutually so, into what I truly wanted to do for the next phase of my journey, which we've been relating this over to purpose, love, what you truly desire over the last handful of videos. So I imagine myself having a conversation in my own imagination of essentially them and the other parties involved with that business initiative saying that they're going in a certain direction that's actually a lot more harmonious, because I felt within myself it was time to transition away from that deal. And I felt that they felt, because others play out the theater of what's within myself, that they wanted to go in a direction harmonious with their visions and their goals. So What ended up happening was, in the imagination, I had this conversation, and everybody was going to get a fair deal out of it. They were all going to benefit greatly, live their purpose, live in their ideal world more so, accomplish what they desire as a result of, I don't know how it was going to transition, because there was a lot of intricacies, nuances, and aspects to this deal. So in that moment, I didn't know how it was going to transition. So all I did was imagine it, because what Neville says is, here, to define your objective, you must be concerned only with the objective itself. The manner of expression or the difficulties involved are not to be considered by you. He says the conscious impresses the subconscious, while the subconscious expresses all that is impressed upon it. So the some way, somehow, known and unknown ways will reveal itself. To have faith that some way, somehow, we will get to that end of all maintaining our ideal world, accomplishing what they desire in their lives and my life, and seeing that in an imaginal scene, which is, to me, a loving law, knowledge of the law of consciousness, the law of love. So what ended up happening, maybe I think a week or two after that, is they all showed up with their own reason as to why they want to transition away from that particular deal that we're doing in a way that was beneficial for everybody. So I had my own reason within myself. They had their own reason. And upon having conversations with them, it turns out that they all had something like a similar conversation in their own imagination of everybody going in a direction that would be ideal. And some way, somehow, it played out as the theater, but from my own perspective, I recognized that I had initiated the change. Now, they claim to have initiated the change. I claim to have initiated the change. And from their stories and my stories of how it plays out, we could track it back to each of us within ourselves initiating the change, which then perhaps it's the same I making the change, expressing outward, as others making the change through this theatrical experience of a story leading to an end. Now, I'm self-persuaded that I initiated the change. They are self-persuaded that they initiated the change. Although we didn't talk about these details, it was very apparent in the conversation that they were self-persuaded that they had initiated the change. And some way, somehow, it actually played out in a harmonious way where we all transitioned and went in the direction that we truly desired. So when I shared the story with him, he understood it. He got it. And I said, this has probably happened to you a number of times before, right? And he was like, yes. And what I noticed is right then and there, he knew what to do. And so I also knew what to do, which is to further encourage this very thing that I was sharing with him. Because remember, we say that, or at least my belief is that people ask for what solution we can provide to whatever challenge or different perspectives in relation to whatever they have as a perceived challenge, as well as they indicate to us what we can do more of, which is essentially the very things that we teach, we can live more so, which is very much related to what we talked about on Thursday's video, which I recommend watching it. And that's because it is representative of the consciousness change. It's so obvious to you that that's the way it works, that it works that way. So I went through Neville's book again, The Power of Awareness, and I pulled 4 aspects to further encourage this with you, provided that it resonates with you, and this is how you really want to live, which is living what you truly desire, creating an ideal world for you, and recognizing that people, environment, circumstance, and information shows up to play the theater within us, and we can do it from the perspective of harmony by imagining love for ourselves and them in the end, an imaginal scene of love for them and ourselves in the end. So 4 parts. Number 1, to impress the subconscious with a desired state, he says, you must assume the feeling that would be yours had you already realized it. So let's tie this into desire in life, law of consciousness, recognizing that love really is the law, and also maintaining an ideal world. So it's easy for us, it's natural for us, it's automatic for us to imagine what we truly love. It's easy to get into the feeling of the wish fulfilled when you really love something. For example, before I made this video, I imagined myself sitting down at this desk here and making this video and feeling that I have fluidity of mind. So I end up going snowboarding, and it seems like it contributes over to the experience right now. The imaginal scene of the end wills the way. And the thing is, I love snowboarding. And also, I love making these videos. So we see the correlation of what he says here. Armed with a working knowledge of this law, you can build and maintain an ideal world. So he says, in defining your objective, you must be concerned only with the objective itself. The manner of expression or the difficulties involved are not to be concerned by you. So in relation to the vision, we don't have to overthink the manner of expression, how it plays out, or the difficulties involved. See, he had a conversation with me and I had the experience, so it was easy for me to go into my reference experience and have this conversation with him and the other clients I had this conversation with. And because he has certain trust and faith in me, at least that's my interpretation, and thus it plays out that way, what we notice is that we show up in each other's lives and we play out the theater. So his theater is, I have a conversation with Joseph. Joseph has the experiences. And from his experiences, I'll know what to do. As a matter of fact, when he booked a call with me and the other clients booked a call with me, who also, I'm just thinking of one, that's why I keep referring to one. They all said that, look, I don't know how this is going to happen, but I just intuitively know what I want, but I just feel that having this conversation with you will make it happen. Because I really do believe that. I really do believe that my reference experience and my understanding of myself and my world is something that others desire to know more of. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy making these videos. And so others show up to also play out the theater. And then I also recognize another belief that I have, which is to do more of these things. So every time I make one of these videos, or every time I go and have the conversations with my clients or do anything, I'm reminded of how I can always understand this information even more so by practicing it more so. So the part when it comes to difficulties is referenced here. Number 4, if you dwell on difficulties, barriers, or delay, the subconscious, by its very non-selective nature, accepts the feeling of difficulties and obstacles as your request and proceeds to produce them in your outer world. So if we would like to the best of our ability, reduce or remove the unnecessary complexity, convolution of experience here in this world in relation to accepting certain feelings which come after accepting that end in relation to difficulties and obstacles, what we can do is return to the end by recognizing what we consciously and unconsciously say I am to. So, once we go to the end, it's done. Some way, somehow, it's going to happen. And we're going to know when it shows up what to do. And we also know what not to do. We call this Wu Wei. And people, environment, circumstance, information shows up to contribute some way, somehow, as the theatrical experience that plays out as the journey to realizing the vision. And those are aspects that are within ourselves that play out in a way that it appears as theater and a journey to the destination. If, for whatever the reason may be, we find ourselves being reactive and associating to certain thought processes of difficulties and obstacles in relation to creating the vision, we can return to the discussion that we had on Sunday, and I'll also emphasize it here, these 3 ways that I put together. Go to the end now, live from the end now, reconcile the past to now. So difficulties and obstacles are thought processes that are a result of perhaps certain past experiences in which we assume that they could show up again on the journey to realizing these goals and these visions. And so thus, having certain kinds of thought processes that we can identify with helps us release from that reactivity, and as a result, not have that identification to those thought processes from the perspective of feeling those difficulties and obstacles sent as instructions to the subconscious mind, which express accordingly. So I put together some nuanced points here that if you are in a similar experience, such as my client, or other experiences in life, which are related to having the ideal world that you want, what you desire in life, what you truly want from the perspective of love, then these perspectives here, when integrated into your being, when this becomes your way of thinking, this becomes what you represent in consciousness, you'll notice a lot more of a flow-based, harmonious, smooth journey to the destination, thus not identifying with, if any thoughts show up, of difficulties and obstacles, rather releasing from the thoughts a lot of times automatically, or they just won't show up. And if they do show up and you find yourself dwelling on them, you'll find it'll be easier to release from those thought processes and not identify and accept the feeling of what those thought processes imply, and thus imagine accordingly, creating unnecessary complexity and convolution. So go to the end now. You can start by imagining something from the perspective of love, which is in harmony with yourself and the others in your life that you're dealing with. Imagining everybody experiencing an ideal outcome as a result of what you desire in the business transaction, in your leadership, in your client dealings, whatever it is. Because acceptance of the end wills the means, the known and the unknown, or as we say, some way, somehow. Now, there's a day-to-day journey that shows up. Things can happen right away, or things can happen tomorrow or next week, or I didn't know that it was going to show up for me, in my experience, 1 or 2 weeks later. However, we do, with our best of our ability, live from the end now, if for whatever the reason may be, we find ourselves being reactive to thought processes of difficulties and obstacles, thus associating the feeling associated with that. And remember the book, Feeling is the Secret, that he released. I recommend watching that video, because it's really about what we resonate with, and we want to resonate with an ideal flow-based pathway to realizing our vision. Perhaps we can look at whatever it is that we're experiencing right now as perceived difficulties and obstacles or thought processes, which are related to this outer world aspects in which we identify through thinking certain meaning of difficult and obstacles to. We can associate perhaps with these perspectives. I find trustworthiness in myself and reflected as others. I find comfort in myself and reflected as others. I find attentiveness in myself and attentiveness as others. So these kinds of statements, when you find it within yourself, as we say, find it within yourself first, and you can have what you want, find it within yourself first, because everything is buried within imagination, and we associate to it by saying, I am too. So I am trustworthy. I am comforting. I feel comfort. I am attentive, which plays out as others being attentive and also comforting in the way, and trustworthy in the way it plays out as a journey to realizing the end. For example, it could have played out in a very stressful way to get to that end goal of that end result, but I imagine them to be that way, that it would be a loving, flow-based, fun way. And if for whatever the reason may be, I found myself being reactive, I would recognize that they're trustworthy because I'm trustworthy, so we'll do it in a way that is mutually loving. I feel comfort within myself, so they're very comforting as far as relationships with them go, so thus I'll feel the comfort. They're attentive to their intuition, I'm attentive to my intuition, and thus we'll all find agreement. Now, these kinds of thought processes in relation to that particular experience that I had were already associated with my self-image through the journey of personal development, because we learn a lot of things through the journey of entrepreneurship, and also through reading books and learning from others, mentors, and so forth. They share with us their assumptions, interpretations, beliefs, perspectives, and we say, oh, I resonate with that, I like that, we identify with it. And so as we continue to do this purification of the mind, which is essentially releasing from unnecessary complexity-based, disempowering, limiting thinking in relation to ourselves and others, environment, circumstance, and information, and identifying with these kinds of thought processes, what we notice is we feel more at ease on the journey to realizing the vision, because you'd have trustworthiness towards others, which is a reflection of trustworthiness to yourself, comfort in how you relate to others, which is a result of comfort to yourself, attentiveness to others, or others being attentive to you as a result of your own attentiveness to your intuition. So essentially, I am to these things in relation to whatever shows up. So if a person feels difficulty, they ask themselves, why do I feel difficulty or obstacle perception right now? Why am I perceiving this? Well, I am that now. So you can go to the end now or relate to that particular difficulty or obstacle now from the perspective of trustworthiness. Like, for example, if you feel difficulty, is it related to trust or not feeling the comfort or attentiveness? Well, I find comfort in myself and reflect it as others. You say something like that. So right then and there, you go back into a feeling of resonance with the vision. And so this is a more conscious way of being. And after doing this for a period of time, it becomes automatic. It becomes your self-image. And you live like this. You don't necessarily think these things. And what you notice is some way, somehow, in a very flow-based, loving way, you get to the destination. Another thing is reconcile the past to now. So perhaps a reason why a person might feel difficulty or obstacle as far as association on certain aspects of the journey in relation to their vision is because they keep thinking about past experiences and relating it over to the current experience or relating it over to the future. And thus, it's important then to make peace with these attributes within yourself. So here are some statements that can help with that. I find commonality in myself and reflected as others. I find supportive experience in myself and reflected in others. I find encouragement in myself and reflected as others. So what this kinds of statements imply is that, well, now you're more in a position of commonality with others because of the internal commonality you found within yourself. So thus, if a thought process in relation to the past shows up that seems to be lack of commonality, lack of supportiveness, lack of encouragement in relation to people or experiences in the past, you recognize that you find it within yourself now, as in it's complete within yourself now, and from this now, it's easy to recognize that that's how people show up in your life. So what we're really looking to do is repetition of the process, repetition of I initiated the change, repetition of the world and all within it is man's conditioned consciousness objectified. Consciousness is the cause as well as the substance of the entire world. So it is to consciousness that we must turn if we would discover the secret of creation. Essentially, what we say I am to, what we identify with in our thinking patterns, will help us to become more of how we truly desire to be. Then it becomes easier for us to accomplish what we desire from a place of flow and then maintain our ideal world. So consider whatever shows up on the journey to realizing your goals and your visions from the perspective of difficulties and obstacles, which is perceived thinking within. This is what we're either consciously or unconsciously imagining within in relation to certain aspects in the five sensory world in which we associate difficulties and obstacles. Consider those to be opportunities to change our thinking in regards to those aspects. And this is why it's important to perhaps study different books, read this information regularly, have conversations with people, watch different videos on these topics from others who have already created success, because what they do is they share with you different kinds of perspectives, such as these perspectives that I've discovered within myself. I find trustworthiness in myself and reflected as others. I find comfort in myself and reflected as others. I find attentiveness in myself and attentiveness as others. And by the way, this is the way that I word it. So you can word it whatever way you'd like, but I trust that you understand what I'm implying when I say this. I find commonality in myself and reflected as others easily. So I like the word easily because then for me, what I recognize is that this becomes more of a flow, joyous-based journey to the destination rather than one of force. Or you could say easier, or you could say it gets easier each day or something like that. I find commonality in myself and reflected as others. I find supportive experience in myself and reflected in others. I find encouragement in myself and reflected as others easily. So these kinds of thought processes, when we subconsciously identify with them, what we find is it's easier to go to the end and accept that the end wills the means through known and unknown ways, some way, somehow, via the programming that is within the subconscious mind that plays out as the theater. And if, for whatever the reason may be, we have certain thought processes of difficulties and obstacles, it's opportunity for cause and effect reflection and perhaps doing the subconscious mind work, which I did a 2-hour discussion recently on The Power of the Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. I recommend you watch that. And as a result of it, what you'll notice is it's going to be a lot more of a flow-based way. And so what I found from working with this information to also keep it in consideration is that I can practice this more so every day. It's not to say that I don't have certain thought processes of difficulties and obstacles show up in relation to different aspects of my life. What I do now is I feel more lighthearted about it. I just see it as an opportunity to change how I relate to it. And I actually look forward to changing how I relate to it and accepting the feeling of how I relate to it in a way which is based on working from the perspective of love to maintain my ideal world within, and thus identify in imagination with, or say I am too, different attributes of how I believe reality works in my life, and thus experience all that on the journey of whatever it is that I do each day. I see it as an opportunity, and I'd like to encourage that with you as well. So I trust you found this video to be helpful. Let's actually conclude this with a series of auto-suggestions related to these ones that I have here. We could say, I realize that every day it's easier for me to accept the end, knowing that the end acceptance wills the way through known and unknown ways, some way, somehow. I find this trustworthiness within myself, to myself, and I notice that others show up with trustworthiness that I found within myself. This brings me a high degree of comfort and peace within myself, representative of others who communicate with me, who experience reality with me from the perspective of comfort and peace. I notice that I'm attentive to my intuition and I honor it as the guidance to realizing my vision. I notice that others show up also intuitively and encourage their intuition, and thus they understand me and I understand them. Finding commonality in myself in relation to these aspects shows up as others who have the commonality with me. As a result, I find supportive experiences in others because I recognize that the supportive experiences of understanding are within myself. I find this extremely encouraging, and I notice that others show up to play out the theater of the encouragement within myself as them encouraging me. If you would like a copy of this mind map, the link is in the description. Thank you very much for watching. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.